Hey students, it's your instructor, Amanda Burbage, and I wanted to give you a quick wrap up on Unit 4. First, I wanted to make a few notes on a recent journal assignment. Students gave feedback on their perception of the interleaving concept of teaching, as well as input on your favorite thinking assignment so far. So I wanted to give you some encouragement because almost the whole class really understood why interleaving was an important teaching principle and saw value in it. Of course, cramming is good when you have a test tomorrow. But when it comes to really deep learning, interweaving is something that makes the content stick. And so I wanted to encourage you to consider using that concept in some way in every class that you're taking. Whether your teacher uses that principle or not, you can still absolutely follow on with that component. Think of some creative ways. I'd love to hear your feedback about ways that you think you could use the interweaving even when your teacher isn't. The other thing is a lot of you, it was actually a pretty mixed feedback. Some people really loved the what was it called? Concept map. Some people really loved the fact versus opinion meme assignment. And then the third vote was for the evil landlady, which people seem to enjoy also. I think certainly the concept map, as well as to a certain extent, the fact and opinion meme assignment are, again, things that you can use in your other courses. I want you to think about this course not just as something, a humanities elective that you have to take and that you have to pass, but rather an opportunity for you to learn, to think. And then once you become a master of learning and a master of thinking, then there's absolutely no stopping you. And when you have a subject that you're passionate about and you have the principles and tools to go along with it, I mean, it's amazing what can happen. And I really believe that, you know, all of you are up to that task. So consider how what we're doing in this class can help you in other courses too. I wanted to talk a little bit about this unit, Unit 4. It's about language and its effect on our ability to think. It's one of my favorite topics. I gotta be honest. I feel like there's just so much to talk about. So it's hard for me to narrow it down. And I hope that you are not overwhelmed by the content that's in the Blackboard shell and in the chapter. But two things just came up within the past month or so. So first is I wanted to talk about the use of language in the news today. I think, of course, you know, what's in the news a lot, which is politics. And so it had been said that President Trump debated on a third grade level, that the language that he used was a third grade level language. And a lot of people criticized him for that. And I think that's really interesting because, in fact, what we see is that third grade level really appeals to the general audience, because when you're going in a debate to make a zinger, to make a win, and it's too complicated, it's too complex, people, they get lost, they're bored. So it just doesn't have the impact. So in fact, his, I don't know if you want to call it unsophisticated, I don't know if that's an okay word, but unsophisticated level of communication actually really helped him in the debates. But here's where I want to bring it back into the class, because our chapter really makes it clear, and I hope that you find this to be true in your own life, that when our language is too vague, then our thinking is also vague. When our language is precise, then our thinking is precise. And so it's great to say have some language that connects with people, but it also means now, okay, we need to push a little farther. What does it mean when you make that third grade level statement? How can we take it into the 10th grade? How can we take it into the senior level of college? How can we take it into the graduate school level? And I think it's very important to demand a little bit more of both details and precision in the language that we're hearing from someone who holds the highest office of the presidency. So I hope that as you consume news and media, that you're really paying close attention to the language that's getting used. Boy, President Trump can really, you know, fire people up. Let's just say that, both for the good and for the bad. So I really would challenge you to think about, like, what's the language you use when you think or talk about him? If you're a supporter, you might really say something like, oh, he's great, he's the best president ever. If you are a detractor, you might say, you know, he's an idiot, I can't stand the guy. But I want you to really examine it, because the way that you're talking about him, oh, those are my lights. The way that you're really talking about him actually will, again, influence the way that you perceive him. Here's another thing to watch out for in the news right now. One thing I read recently, I feel like it was in USA Today just about a month or so ago. It was an editorial. The title was "President Trump is a Master of Language." And I just, of course, loved that title, and it drew me in right away. Here's why. Because a few things. One is he is very good at using emotive language. But what we know from the chapter is that emotive language can be dangerous because it distracts us from the logic of an argument and forces us to really make decisions from an emotional standpoint. Now, emotions have a place in decision making. I truly believe that and support that. But also, we need to be careful. We can't make it too emotional. There must also be logic and fact supporting whatever claims are being made. Another thing that was from that article was it said something about President Trump being the ambassador of the post-truth era, that he says things that are just so bombastic, but that's part of his personality. And that really touches a place in us as the people. And that really caught my attention because in our unit about language and critical thinking, we have to be on guard for that. So when President Trump is saying something and you're like, oh, I can't stand it, or if President Trump is saying something and you're like, yeah, let's do it, that should be an indicator to you that some critical thinking needs to be put in place. You might still agree or you might still disagree, and that's fine. But we want to make sure that we're not making these kinds of decisions only based on the emotions that he's invoking with his language use. Now, of course, I focused a lot on President Trump here just because he's the #1 thing in the news, and it's important for you to be citizens of this country as productive and intelligent and active members of the community. So you can see this in a variety of areas too. You can see it in the media. You can see it in, leadership in companies. In fact, recently there's this website that I read for, it's called TES, Teacher Education Support, something like that. And they were talking about how with budget cuts, we need to get rid of inefficiencies. Well, inefficiencies is, of course, a euphemism for anything I want to cut out of my budget. And if you can't prove to me that it works, then it needs to be cut. Or inefficiency also kind of sets the stage to where even if we've had year after year after year of cuts, if it still has some inefficiency, well, I guess that means you can still cut more. So often I think educational leadership will hide behind, inefficiencies, and rather than just calling it what it is, which is we need to have teachers who are better, we need to have parents who are more involved, or we need to have, a curriculum that's better aligned, or we need to have, equipment that works. But when we call them inefficiencies, somehow people feel a little more comfortable exploring and doing a deep dive on cutting. So the idea that language can be used for persuasion is across the board, from the personal to the political, from the private to the public. And all right, so speaking of language being persuasive, this will be the last thing I tell you for our update, okay? Because I'm getting a little long here. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the debate analysis assignment, because I want to encourage you students who have not yet turned in your papers to watch the debate more than once. Take the time to do that. Take the time to go to the Writing Center. I cannot tell you how much the difference is made when students have their work reviewed by Writing Center staff. But here's the main thing I want to tell you about this assignment. Don't spend time convincing me you're right. All right. I don't care what your opinion is. I love you, but I don't care what your opinion is. This assignment is meant for you to do two things. One is identify the elements of language that are used as leverage or as tools to persuade the audience. All right. So I'm wanting you to kind of take that over top view of the debate and just say, ooh, he or she used this phrase. That seemed very compelling. So I'm really wanting you to look at the tools and conventions of persuasion and language use in terms of critical thinking and how it shaped the argument. And then the second thing is I want you to do a little bit of a personal reflection. What was what was persuasive to you personally? You might be persuaded by statistics, but I might be persuaded by a story. And so it's important for you to know who you are in terms of a critical thinker and what you are more and less susceptible to. And this, of course, will help you in your everyday life, both in school and at work, and as you consume all the news that I was talking about just a moment ago. All right, well, thanks for listening to me for this Unit 4 wrap up. I look forward to reading those assignments soon. Don't forget about the quiz, which is also on the same day. And of course, if you have any questions, you know who to contact.